My name is Lucas. I'm 20 years old, and there's someone in my life who means everything to me, John. We met in high school, and a lot has changed since then, but our relationship has only grown stronger. Common interests, plans for the future, and even minor disagreements have brought us closer. We both love basketball. Sport became more than just a hobby for us. It became a bonding element. Every evening after school, we went to the playground, threw the ball into the hoop, and argued about who scored more points this time. These moments were simple but happy. Time flew by in high school. We took exams together, prepared for graduation, and discussed universities. John always supported me, especially when I doubted my abilities. His confidence that I could achieve anything was infectious. After graduation, we entered different universities. It was not an easy decision. Separation was scary, but we promised each other that the distance would not be an obstacle. And indeed, it was not. Every weekend, I came to John, or he came to me. We walked, watched films, and discussed studies. But a year later, everything changed. We were both tired of moving around so much, so John suggested we move in together. "It'll be easier," he said with a smile that could convince me of anything. And though I hesitated, fearing change, the idea felt right. We found an apartment in a small area near John's university. The apartment was cozy, although a little cramped, but that didn't bother us. We divided the chores. I did the cooking, and John did the cleaning. Our life began to resemble a family. Everything went smoothly until one evening when John said, "We need to talk." Something strange was in his voice. I closed the book I was reading and looked at him carefully. "What happened?" John paused, collected his thoughts, and said, "Listen, I was thinking, maybe we should find a third neighbor." I frowned. The offer was unexpected. We had barely gotten used to living together, and now he suggested letting someone else into our lives. "Why?" I asked, trying not to show my displeasure. "There's not enough money," he answered honestly. "If we split the rent between 3 people, it'll be easier." I sighed. He was right. It was true that there were difficulties with paying the rent, but the idea of a third roommate did not appeal to me. "Only if it's temporary," I finally said. We agreed to start looking for a suitable candidate. John took the matter seriously. I tried not to dwell on the thought that someone else would soon appear in our apartment. Oliver showed up at our apartment unexpectedly. John had arranged everything while I was at school, so he met him in the evening. Tall and slightly unshaven, he looked a little older than us, which was surprising. His confident demeanor filled the entire space. "This is Lucas," John introduced me, "and this is Oliver, our new neighbor." "It's nice to meet you," he said, holding his hand. His low, slightly husky voice contrasted with his gentle smile. I shook his hand and replied briefly, "Hello." Oliver's smile widened, and I thought there was something more than just friendliness behind it. I assumed it was my imagination, but our tension was growing. The first day after moving in was calm. Oliver quickly settled in, put his things away in the third room, and offered to buy pizza to celebrate his housewarming. We had a small dinner in the living room, trying to get to know each other better. "So, Oliver, what do you do?" I asked, trying to keep the conversation going. "I'm studying architecture," he replied, grinning. "It takes up almost all my time, but I like it." "What brought you here?" John continued. "Architecture students usually live closer to campus. The rent in the center is too expensive," Oliver admitted honestly. "But this place is suitable, and you guys seem normal." We laughed. John, of course, immediately found a common language with him. They chatted about favorite films and music, and even discussed some new TV series I hadn't heard of. I felt like a spare part, but tried not to show it. The next day, we invited Oliver to play basketball with us. He was clearly not a fan of the sport, but he agreed. "Why not? I need to impress you somehow." We went to the playground near the park where we usually played together. Oliver was clearly trying, but it looked funny. His movements were clumsy, and the ball flew everywhere but into the hoop. However, he learned quickly. "Catch!" John shouted, throwing the ball. Oliver caught him, but slipped, losing his balance. We laughed, and he blushed. but there was a smile on his face. "Well, I warned you that I had no experience," he said, wiping his palms on his shorts. "It's okay," John replied. "By the end of the month, you'll be throwing better than both of us." Oliver looked at him with a slight doubt, but it seemed to cheer him up. After the game, we went to a nearby cafe. John ordered drinks for all of us while I watched Oliver. There was something about him that was hard to describe in words, a mixture of ease and calm. He wasn't trying to be liked, but he succeeded. "Thanks for inviting me," he said, sipping lemonade. "It was fun, even though I played like a novice." "It's okay," John replied. "It's all for fun." "How long have you been playing?" Oliver asked me. "Since childhood," I answered briefly. "I see," he nodded, smiling slightly. "That's probably why I looked like a kid who had just found a ball next to you." John laughed, but I said nothing. My attention was focused on their conversation. They were joking and discussing some trivial things, and I was losing the conversation thread more and more. We returned home in the evening. Oliver locked himself in his room, and I sat on the sofa in the living room, trying to figure out what was wrong. John came in later with a smile on his face. "I think he fits in really well," he said, throwing his gym bag into the corner. "Perhaps," I answered uncertainly. "Lucas is just a guy who needs a roof over his head. You're overexerting yourself." "I'm not straining myself," I objected, but my words lacked conviction. John looked at me as if trying to understand something but said nothing. He went into the bedroom, leaving me alone. A week had passed since Oliver had moved in. John and I were slowly getting used to his presence, although it was difficult. Oliver was friendly and open, quickly settled into the apartment, and seemed to have always been there. He had learned to play basketball quickly, better than expected, and now he is often suggested to go to the court. But I was beginning to worry about how John and Oliver spent their time together. At first, I took it in stride. John had always been easy to get along with, and his friendliness was one of the things I liked about him. But the more I saw them laughing over movies they shared or talking about new games I wasn't playing, the more jealous I became. "How are you?" John asked one evening as I sat beside him on the sofa. "Okay," I responded, looking at the TV screen. Oliver was just showing him some new strategy in the game. "You're too tired from studying," he noted. "You should take a couple of days off." I shrugged. Studying took up much of my time, but that wasn't the main reason for my mood. I felt like I was starting to lose John. That evening, I tried to talk to him. When Oliver went to his room, I went to John, who was already getting ready for bed. "You've been spending a lot of time with Oliver," I said, trying to stay calm. John looked at me in surprise. "Are you serious? We were just discussing his studies and basketball." "Lucas, what's wrong with you?" I felt my face heat up. Was it that obvious? I looked away. "Just don't forget that you have me." He came closer and took my hand. "Lucas, you are more important than everyone. Don't even think otherwise." I nodded, although inside I wasn't sure I liked it. A few more days passed. John started paying more attention to me, but when I came home, I often saw him with Oliver. They would be sitting in the kitchen with cups of coffee, discussing some new idea, or watching a movie I had already missed. One day, I decided to join them. John suggested that we play basketball together, and I agreed. It was a day off, the weather was warm, and the court was almost empty. "Let's see who wins today," John said with a smile. The game began. Oliver had really improved his skills, and now he was passing the ball well and making accurate throws. John constantly encouraged him, and I thought I wanted to prove something, but I don't know what. "Nice try, Lucas," Oliver said when I missed. There was no mockery in his voice, but it still hurt. "Thanks," I muttered, picking up the ball. By the end of the game, I was exhausted. John and Oliver stood nearby laughing over some insignificant moment, and I stayed away, trying to hide my feelings. I couldn't stand it any longer at home, alone with John. "You really don't notice how you're pushing me away?" I asked, feeling my voice tremble. "What are you talking about?" John looked confused. "Oliver, you spend more time with him than with me. I miss you, John." John paused, then sighed heavily. "Lucas, you're exaggerating. He's just a friend. I love you, you know that." I wanted to believe him, but my jealousy continued to eat away at me. That same evening, I heard John and Oliver laughing in the living room while I was sitting there. Over time, my anxiety turned into an overwhelming feeling of jealousy. John was spending more and more time with Oliver, and even though I tried to ignore it, it was impossible. They laughed at jokes I didn't understand, discussed movies I hadn't seen, and went off to play basketball while I was in class. Every interaction they had reminded me that I was no longer the only one who held an important place in John's life. One day, when I came home earlier than usual, I saw them sitting on the couch, hunched over John's phone. They were discussing something, their faces too close together. John noticed me first and looked up. "Oh, you're early," he said, smiling. "Yes, classes were canceled," I replied, barely containing my irritation. "We're looking for a new basketball," Oliver explained. "I want to buy my own, so I don't have to buy yours." I nodded, feeling a lump growing in my throat. Everything looked innocent on the outside, but a hurricane was already boiling inside. That night, I decided to have a serious talk with John. After Oliver had left his room, I closed the bedroom door and turned to him. "We need to talk," I said, trying to keep my voice level. Already getting ready for bed, John looked at me with slight surprise. "Did something happen?" "Yes, it happened. You don't notice how much you've changed. You spend all your time with Oliver. Something's going wrong between us." John frowned, sat on the bed, and gestured for me to sit beside him. "Lucas," he began calmly, "I understand that you're jealous but exaggerating." "Am I exaggerating? You're always with him. You go play basketball without me, you watch movies together. You don't even notice how you're moving away from me." "You were at school, Lucas," he retorted. "What was I supposed to do? Sit at home alone?" "You could have called me and waited," I said, feeling my hands shaking. "Instead, you chose him." John paused, considering my words. Then he sighed. "Maybe you're right," he said finally. "I do spend a lot of time with him. But Lucas, you have to understand, it's not because he's replacing you." "Then what?" I whispered, barely holding back my tears. John was silent for a long time, avoiding my gaze. Then he finally said, "I think I feel something more for Oliver." These words hit me like a bolt from the blue. I couldn't believe he said it. "What do you mean?" I asked, although I was afraid of hearing the answer. "I like him," John admitted, "and the feeling is mutual." At that moment, I felt like the world was falling apart. It wasn't just the fear of losing John. It was the realization that everything we had built could disappear. "I thought you and I were one," I said, barely holding back tears. "You're still important to me," John said, his voice thick with guilt. "I love you, Lucas. I really do." I wanted to leave so as not to see him, but he grabbed my hand, stopping me. "Wait," he said. "There is something I wanted to discuss." Before I could answer, there was a knock on the door. Oliver was standing there, and I could tell from his face that he had heard everything. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. John nodded, and Oliver walked in, closing the door behind him. He looked confused but didn't avoid my gaze. "John told me what you discussed," he said, "and I must say, I like both of you." I didn't know what to answer. Everything seemed too strange, too wrong. "So I suggest," John continued, "that we try something new, the three of us together." Oliver was silent, giving me time to digest what he had just heard. I couldn't believe John had suggested such a thing. It sounded absurd, wrong. But I knew one thing. I couldn't lose him. "Is this temporary?" I asked, feeling a conflict tearing through me. John looked me in the eye. "If it doesn't work out, we'll stop everything." Oliver nodded. "I don't want anyone to feel left out," he added. I looked at them both. Everything in my head screamed, "No," but my heart wouldn't let me leave. "Okay," I whispered, "but only temporarily." The next day, everything felt strange. We had agreed to try living together as a threesome, but despite this, there was an awkward silence in the apartment. We were trying to figure out how to fit into the new dynamic. John took on the role of liaison. He tried to be as attentive to Oliver and me as possible, involving us both in conversations and shared plans. This helped smooth the tension, but I still felt like I was in the shadows. "Let's watch a movie tonight," John suggested in the evening. "You two choose something, and I'll cook dinner." "Okay," I responded, trying to make my voice sound natural. Oliver and I sat down in front of the TV. He handed me the remote. "Choose." "Maybe you should choose?" I suggested. He looked at me with a slight smile. "Okay then, something light." We chose a comedy. John joined a little later with plates in hand. We ate and laughed at the film's scenes, and for a while, I even forgot about my doubts. But as soon as the movie ended, things got complicated again. John put his arm around me, and then, with a slight movement, he pulled Oliver towards him. It seemed so natural, but I was the odd one. The next day, John suggested playing basketball. "The three of us, as a team," he said enthusiastically. I reluctantly agreed. Everything was going well, but I felt my insides turn over when John put his arm around Oliver after his successful throw. They seemed so in sync, as if I was just a spectator. "Lucas, what's wrong?" John asked, noticing my tension. "Everything's fine," I answered, trying not to look him in the eyes. After the game, I locked myself in my room, hoping to come to my senses a little. But after a while, Oliver knocked on the door. "Can I come in?" I hesitated but opened the door. Oliver walked in, his face serious. "Listen, I understand how hard this is for you." "Really?" I said, feeling my anger rising. "Yes," he answered calmly. "I see how much you love John, and it scares me because I feel the same way about him." I turned away, not knowing what to say. "But I don't want to hurt you," he added. "I'm not asking you to trust me, but I hope we can work this out somehow." I nodded, but there were so many doubts inside that it was hard to imagine how things could improve. That evening, John had a family dinner. The three of us sat around the table chatting about small things. It was supposed to help us bond, but my mind was still spinning with thoughts about John looking at Oliver longer than he did at me. One night, when I fell asleep, John hugged me and said, "Do you know that I love you?" I didn't answer, I just closed my eyes. Life with the three of us was more complicated than I expected. Every day was a test. I tried not to show my feelings, and John tried to be equal for both of us. But the more I looked at them, the more jealous I became. Oliver seemed to sense this. He often tried to help me, offering to go for a walk together or just talk. But I couldn't stop perceiving him as a threat. John, in turn, joked more and more often about how the three of us should spend more time together. "We're a team, remember?" he said with a smile. Despite John's best efforts to bring the three of us together, I couldn't shake the feeling that our dynamic was cracking at the seams. Jealousy was gnawing at me from the inside, but I tried to keep it inside to not upset the fragile balance. One evening, when the three of us were sitting in the living room, John suddenly suggested, "Why don't you two spend time together?" I looked at him in surprise. "What do you mean?" "You and Oliver," he clarified. "Like go play basketball or watch a movie." "And you?" I asked, trying not to show my excitement. "Me?" John smiled. "I need some time to myself too." Oliver nodded as if the suggestion seemed natural to him. I felt my insides turning over. Following John's plan, Oliver and I went to the basketball court the next day. The game started tense, with each of us trying to avoid unnecessary conversation. Still, soon, I noticed that Oliver had relaxed. He was no longer trying to show that he knew everything, but was enjoying the process. "You're not a bad player," I admitted when he hit the hoop several times. "Thank you," he replied with a smile, "but you're still better." It sounded sincere, and I felt grateful that he acknowledged my experience. After the game, we sat on the bench to catch our breath. Oliver wiped the sweat from his forehead and looked at me. "You still don't trust me, do you?" I shuddered at the directness of his question. "What makes you think that?" "It's obvious," he said calmly. "I understand why. If I were you, I'd feel the same way." I wanted to object, but he continued, "I don't want you to think I came here to ruin what you have with John. That's not true." "What is it then?" I asked, unable to contain my sarcasm. Oliver shrugged. "I guess it's something new for all of us." His words touched me. It was clear that he was also trying to figure out what was happening, and my anger began to subside. When we got home, John was waiting for us with dinner. The evening passed in a relaxed atmosphere, and I felt part of the team for the first time in a long time. But the most unexpected thing happened later that night. We were sitting on the couch, discussing a movie, when John suddenly interrupted the conversation. "I have an idea," he said with a mysterious smile. "What's the idea?" Oliver asked, turning to face him. John turned to me and then to Oliver and said, "I think you should try to get closer to each other." "What?" I didn't immediately understand its meaning. "Closer," he repeated. "I want you to try to trust each other." I didn't know what to say and looked at Oliver. He looked as confused as I did. John leaned forward and put his hand on my shoulder. "Trust me, Lucas," he said quietly. That was the first time I kissed someone other than John, and surprisingly, I even liked it. But it didn't end with one kiss. John joined us. He took my tool with one hand and started to dry it, after which Oliver joined him. It was something incredible when they started doing it in sync. Then they kissed, after which they put me on my knees, and one of them gave me his tool for drying, and the second started to draw eights, and we had sex. This situation improved our relationship, but not for long. The next day, I felt strange. It seemed that Oliver and I really had some new connection. We started talking more and sharing our thoughts, and although I was still jealous, I knew that something had changed. This didn't solve all the problems, however. John seemed to enjoy the three of us building a relationship. Still, I noticed that he was drawn to being the center of attention. He did everything he could to make sure none of us felt left out. But it increasingly felt like a tense game where everyone was trying not to break the rules. Life as a threesome became increasingly complicated. At first, we tried to maintain a balance, sharing John's attention and trying to find common ground with each other. But behind the apparent calm, there was tension and unspokenness. John, as always, tried to lead our small team. He organized joint evenings, suggested new activities, and even discussed plans for the future. Still, I felt I was gradually losing my place in these plans. One evening, while playing a board game, Oliver laughed at one of John's jokes. Their laughter was easy, but I couldn't shake being left out. "Are you okay?" John asked, noticing my silence. "Everything's fine," I responded, avoiding his gaze. "If something's wrong, you can tell," Oliver added. "Nothing," I repeated, feeling my irritation growing. After the game, I went to my room and left them alone. I heard their voices and laughter but didn't want to go out. Jealousy was making itself known again. The next day, the three of us went to the basketball court. The game was supposed to ease the tension, but it went wrong. John and Oliver were on the same team, and I was facing them. Their cohesion seemed like a challenge to me, as if they had forgotten I was there. "Lucas, have you given up?" John teased when I missed another throw. "No, it's simply impossible to play with you," I answered sharply, throwing the ball to the ground. John frowned and Oliver came closer. "Hey, it's just a game," he said, trying to smooth things. "Yes, a game in which I'm always the odd one out," I blurted out without holding back. After that, I left, leaving them on the court. I knew my reaction was overly emotional, but inside I was seething. When I returned home, John was already waiting for me. "Lucas, we need to talk," he began. "About what?" I snapped, still feeling offended. "About what's going on," he said. "I can see how hard it is for you. Did you just notice this now?" I looked at him defiantly. John sighed heavily. "This is difficult for all of us, but it's like you're pushing Oliver and me away." "What did you expect?" I exclaimed. "You brought him into our home and relationship, and now you pretend everything is fine." Oliver walked into the room. His face was tired, but he looked calm. "Lucas, I never wanted you to feel this way," he said quietly. "But you knew it would happen," I replied, barely containing my emotions. John stepped between us. "That's enough," he said firmly. "We have to sort this out." The conversation lasted until late at night. We tried to be honest about our feelings, but seemed to be going in circles. John admitted wanting to build something new, but didn't know how to do it right. Oliver said he had feelings for both of us, but he was afraid he would ruin our relationship. And I just couldn't get rid of the thought that I was losing John. After this conversation, the atmosphere in the apartment became even more tense. We continued to live together, but increasingly avoided each other. John began to spend more time outside the house, explaining this by his studies and business. Oliver became withdrawn, and I felt the gap between us growing. One evening, as I was lying in my room, John came to me. "We have to decide something," he said. I nodded, although I didn't know what he wanted to say. "I can't see us all suffering," he continued. "If we don't find a way to be together, we'll have to—" He didn't finish, but I knew what he was getting at. The words stuck in my throat. Everything collapsed on the day when the three of us finally decided to talk honestly, without omissions. The atmosphere in the apartment became so tense that it was impossible to live like that any longer. John suggested that we meet at the table that evening. I knew this conversation could change everything, but I couldn't say for the better or worse. The three of us sat there, each avoiding eye contact. John opened the conversation. "We need to talk about our feelings. This isn't working." "Yeah, right," I said sarcastically, unable to contain my irritation. "Lucas, let's not do this," he asked. "We need to be honest." I fell silent, and there was an awkward pause. Oliver spoke first. His voice was calm, but there was uncertainty in it. "I want to be honest. I knew I was interfering in your relationship from the beginning, and I thought I could be a part of something new. But now I'm starting to doubt it." I raised my head and looked him straight in the eye for the first time in a long time. "You doubt it?" I asked again. "And you thought it would be easy?" Oliver nodded. "No, but I didn't expect it to be this difficult." John placed his hands on the table, leaning forward. "Oliver, do you feel you don't want to continue?" Oliver was silent for a long time before answering, "I don't think I can be a part of it." I felt something tighten inside me. This was the moment I had been waiting for, but somehow it didn't bring me relief. "Then why did you agree to this?" I blurted out. "Because I sincerely wanted to be with both of you," he replied, looking at me with pain. "But I see that this is destroying you and me." John turned to me. "And you, Lucas? What do you want?" I closed my eyes, trying to find an answer. All I knew was that I loved John, but the feeling of jealousy and resentment was eating away at me. "I want things to be like before," I whispered. "It won't be like before," John said quietly. "We've all changed." These words cut me harder than I expected. "So this is the end?" I asked, looking from John to Oliver. John looked at both of us and nodded slowly. "Perhaps this is the best solution." We sat in silence for a long time until Oliver finally stood up. "I think it's time for me to leave." He said it calmly, but I noticed how his hands were shaking. "Are you sure?" John asked. Oliver nodded. "It's best for all of us." I didn't say anything. Everything had already been said. The next day, Oliver started packing. I tried not to interfere, but his eyes were tired and sad. Before leaving, he came up to me. "Lucas," he began, falling silent as if he didn't know what to say. "Everything is fine," I answered, feeling the moment demanded it. He extended his hand to me, but I suddenly hugged him. It was a farewell in which there was no anger, only weariness. When the door closed behind him, the apartment seemed eerily empty. John came up to me and put his hand on my shoulder. "We can work this out," he said, but there was uncertainty in his voice. I nodded, even though I didn't believe it myself. We had lost not only Oliver, but a part of ourselves. After Oliver left, the flat felt strangely empty. Everything that had once seemed familiar now felt awkward. John tried to maintain an atmosphere of normality, but our relationship became strained. "Everything will be like before again," he said one evening as we sat on the sofa. I didn't answer. I knew he wanted stability back, but our feelings weren't so simple. At first, John tried to be more attentive. He suggested watching movies, cooking dinners, and even inviting me on a date to the park, where we kissed for the first time. We walked along the alleys and talked about minor things, but the conversations were no longer light. "I know you're still angry," he said as we sat on the bench. "I'm not angry," I replied, although I wasn't sure if it was true. He sighed, taking my hand. "I want you to know I chose you because I love you." These words should have calmed me, but instead, I felt uneasy. I couldn't shake the feeling that Oliver still occupies a place in John's thoughts. These doubts were confirmed when I accidentally saw John's correspondence with Oliver. He left his phone on the table, and as I passed by, I noticed his name in the chat list. My hand reached for the phone of its own accord. "How are you?" was the last message from John. Oliver's response was short, but warm. They were clearly still communicating, and I felt anger flare up inside me. When John came back into the room, I couldn't help myself. "You're still texting him?" I blurted out. He paused, noticing my tone. "Yeah, sometimes. We're just friends, Lucas." Friends? I couldn't believe my ears. After everything that happened? "I don't want to lose touch with him," he admitted. "Have you lost me yet?" I asked, feeling my voice trembling. John took a step towards me, but I pulled away. "You promised that you chose me, but how can I believe that if you still hold on to him?" "It's not like you think," he tried to explain. "I love you." "You already said that," I answered coldly and went to my room. This argument was a turning point. The next day, I packed my things and moved into the dorm. I left a note on the table with the short text, "I need time." John tried to call, but I didn't answer. I needed to think, to rethink everything that had happened in the last few months. I found support among my roommates in the dorm. They didn't know my whole story, but their ease and openness helped me take my mind off things. We played board games, cooked dinners together, and discussed movies. A week passed before I answered John's call. He sounded tired. "Lucas, I just want to know if we can—" "We had our chance, John," I replied. "But you chose him, even when you said you chose me." He was silent, and I felt it no longer hurt to say it. "We can't go back to what was," I added. "So this is the end?" His voice became barely audible. "I think so," I said, pressing the end call button. A month later, I unblocked him on social media. There, I saw a photo of John and Oliver smiling against a cityscape backdrop. They were together. I wasn't angry. On the contrary, it confirmed that I had made the right choice. I wrote a short, sarcastic comment under the post and unsubscribed. Several months had passed since I had started my new life. One evening, after another basketball game, I sat in the park and watched the sunset. A light wind played with the leaves, and somewhere in the distance, the music of a street musician sounded. A girl I'd seen around campus before sat down next to me, Emily. She often came to watch our games. The smile on her face was genuine, like someone who wasn't afraid to be herself. "Did you win again?" she asked, leaning forward slightly. "This time it's a team. Basketball isn't about one player," I replied with a grin. She laughed, and her laughter was infectious. We talked all evening, discussing our favorite movies and student life. There was a lightness in her eyes that was calming. As I walked home, I realized that I felt free for the first time in a long time, free from the past, from those painful memories that I once considered an inseparable part of myself. Fate has taught me another lesson. My relationships with John and Oliver have taught me one thing. Loving yourself is no less important than loving someone else. Without this love, no relationship can be healthy. I looked at my phone, and for the first time in a long time, I typed a message to John. "Thanks for everything. I hope you are happy." The answer came instantly. "You deserve better, Lucas. Good luck to you." With a smile, I turned off the phone and put it in my pocket. My soul felt light, as if I had finally put an end to it. I looked back at the campus lights and realized that life was just beginning. Somewhere out there in the cool of the night, new games, new meetings, and perhaps new love were waiting. But most importantly, I was ready for it.